Very good morning to everybody. Good afternoon, in fact. It's 12:30. Thank you for continuously supporting UB Research Essentials series. So we're going to continue our session today to focus on the results and discussion. Be informed, as usual, this session is being recorded. All your microphones, your microphone currently will be muted. At the end of the presentation, you can raise your question by using the raise hand option, or just post your question in the chat and we will come back to your question at the end of the session. As usual, just a quick snapshot of what this session is all about. Over the past many weeks, we have been running this UB Research Essentials series to assist all researchers at UB and outside UB with the aim to strengthen their knowledge and skills in executing good research projects and publications. This session is also good and essential for those who are keen to continue their graduate studies. Okay, so it's good for graduate students and researchers. So I hope you benefit from the session today. At any point during the next few weeks, even if you have any question, please do not hesitate to email us at research@ub.edu.es. So today's session, as I've said, is going to be focused on the results and discussion. We have one more session on on Tuesday next week on the conclusion and the final details. That will conclude the first segment of the session on the fundamentals of organizing and writing academic research paper, before we proceed to the next one, or the next session on the additional essential knowledge on research skills. So on the 5th June, as you are aware, it's a public holiday, but we will still proceed with the session. We have recorded all your emails in our registration. So if you think that the 5th June, you're not available to log in, no worries. We will still proceed with the session, and the recorded session will be emailed directly to you, including the presentation slides. If you have not received any of our presentation or recorded sessions, please email us at research@ub.edu.bs and we will send it to you. All right, so let's get into the class today. So today's session is very much to continue from where we left off. Okay, last session was very much to focus on methodology, and within the methodology we also did some discussion and results. How do you present quantitative and qualitative research methodology, and how do you present the findings from these two approaches in the results and discussion? So today we're going to be drilling directly into these two areas. So the first part, I will focus on the results, and Ms. Virginia Ballance will actually focus on the discussion on the second half of the session today. So let's look at defining results section in any publication. The results section of a scientific research paper represent the core findings of a study derived from the methods applied to gather and analyze information. It presents and states these findings in a logical sequence without bias or interpretation from the author, but setting up the reader for later interpretation and evaluation in the discussion section. Remember, the major purpose of the results section is to break down the data into sentences that show its significance to the research question. It's always tied back to the research questions. In most scientific papers, the results section appears after the methodology section and is presented before the discussion section, although the results and discussions are presented together in many journals as well. So sometimes it is put in two different sections and sometimes it is put together. So this section answers the basic question: what did you find in your research? Okay, it's a past tense. What did you find? So when you write this section, remember that the results of a study do not prove anything. Research results can only confirm or reject the research problem underpinning your study. However, the act of articulating the result helps you to understand the problem from within, to break it into pieces, and to view the research problem from various perspectives. The page length of this section is set by the amount and type of data to be reported. But always remember to be concise. Using non-textual element, which we did briefly in the last session, such as figures and tables, if appropriate, to be presented here as well. In deciding what data to describe in your results section, you must clearly distinguish materials that would normally be included in a research paper from any raw data or other materials that could be included as appendix. Because remember, with a lot of data that you have, you need to decide what goes into the result and what goes into the appendix. So in most cases, raw data should not be included in the main text of your paper unless there is a real need. Avoid providing data that is not critical to answering the research question. The background information you described in the introduction section should provide the reader with any additional context or explanation needed to understand the result. A good rule is to always reread the background section of your paper after you have written up your results to ensure that the readers has enough context to understand the result, and later how you interpret the result in discussion section of your paper. So go back to your background after you have written your result, because things will change. The results may change. It's not what you expected, and you need to restructure the background. Let us now look at how to structure and approach the result section. Generally, there are two ways of presenting and organizing the result. First, the first approach is present the results followed by a short explanation of the findings. For example, you may have noticed an unusual correlation between two variables during the analysis of your findings. It is correct to point this out in the results section. However, speculating as to why this correlation exists and offering a hypothesis about what may be happening belongs in the discussion section of the paper. Okay, so that's the first way of writing. The second approach, present a section and the discussion together, okay, before presenting the next section and discussing on it. So here, what happens is the result and the discussion is put together. This is more common in longer papers because it helps the reader to better understand each findings. In this approach, it can be helpful to provide a brief conclusion in the results section that ties each of the findings together and links it to the discussion. The discussion section should generally follow the same format chosen in presenting and organizing the results. The content of the results section should include the following elements: an introductory context for understanding the result by restating the research problem that underpins the main objective or purpose of this study. Second, a summary of your key findings, arranged in a logical sequence that generally follows your methodology section. Inclusion of non-textual elements such as figures, charts, photo, maps, tables to further illustrate the findings if appropriate. In the text as well, a systematic description of your result, highlighting for the reader observation that are most relevant to the topic under investigation can also be included. Remember that not all results that emerge from the methodology that you use together may be relevant. So you got to decide what is relevant and what is not relevant to be captured. Use the past tense as usual when referring to your result. Focus only on findings that are important and related to addressing the research problem. Having a non-textual element, which we discussed widely in our last session, in our publication, is useful. Having this non-textual element is critical because it is going to help explain or help elaborate your findings more clearly to the reader. A picture is worth 1,000 words. So when you embed charts, illustration, table, graph, maps, or photograph, or any other non-textual element in your research paper, it can bring clarity to the study because it provides a clean, concise way to report your findings rather than having long and boring text-based and paragraph to describe something. Non-textual elements are useful tool for summarizing information, especially when you have a great deal of data to present. So non-textual element will also help the reader capture a large amount of data quickly in a orderly fashion. Non-textual element help you highlight important pieces of information without breaking up the narrative flow of your paper. Illustration, photographs, maps, and can quickly give you reference to information that helps to highlight key issues found in the text. So this will further help in your understanding of what you are reading. Non-textual elements are visually engaging. So having charts or photographs can really enhance the overall presentation of your research. It also supports your key findings. Readers should be able to understand non-textual element on their own without even having to refer to the text. So that is useful. They must have neat, legible labels. It must be simple, and they have detailed caption that will allow the reader to understand what is being presented without even reading the actual text. So there are some common non-textual elements that we use: the charts, figures, and tables, if you see. So examples: flowchart, histogram, illustration, maps, pictograph, symbols, and anything else that is relevant here. So you place non-textual element within the text of the result, or sometimes in some articles, it is placed right at the end. Try to distinguish non-textual element used in the text versus what is appearing in the appendix. It's two different things. Refer and reference or even caption them in an orderly manner. Use the cross-reference option. If you see the screen, I have a small diagram there. Try to use this cross-reference option to insert table or figures in Microsoft Word rather than doing it manually. Just like how you insert a table of contents automatically in Microsoft Word, you can do the same for figures and tables. So whenever you change your figures on table, it will automatically provide the listing for you, and you don't need to go back and forth to rewrite the list of tables, the list of figures, or the list of charts that is being used. Ensure all non-textual element could stand on its own. Okay, so this is important. Make sure it is clear enough. Besides all that, there are other important things elements that you need to understand as well. The non-textual element should be referenced explicitly. What it means is, do not have the habit of using certain words to describe where the text, where the table or figure is going to be. Avoid expressions like in the chart on the following page, in the table below. Do not do that, because In your actual publication, you don't know where the table is going to be. You do not know where the figure is going to be. Always say figure 1.1, figure 2, figure 3, table 1, table 2. Always reference it correctly. Position in close as possible. As far as possible, try to position your figures or table or whatever non-textual element that you're using the closest to where it is being described. Of course, it's sometimes beyond your control because of the paging. It may run to the next page, it may run to the following page, but try to put it as close as possible, and it must be commented or discussed. Don't put a table or figure and nothing is mentioned about this table or figure in the chart, in the text. So please comment on it or discuss at least briefly. Ensure that all your non-textual elements that you're using are consistent in the loop. Okay, so always check the publication's house style. How should a table be? Can you use horizontal line? Can you use vertical line? How should the image be presented? How should the figure be presented? There is a house style, there is a guideline that you must follow. Where is the source of non-textual elements? So this is important. A lot of people forget about this. Where did you get this table of figures or chart from? Is this yours? Depending on the publication, there is a house style. How do you describe the source? Some publications require you to give the source for every single non-textual element that is used, even though it is yours. You need to mention if it is yours. So if you look at this next slide, so there are different ways you can actually reference a non-textual element. We look at the first figure, referencing non-textual element from other source. So this source is coming from this University of Salford in 1970. So University of Salford 1970 will actually appear in your reference list as the source of where this figure basically came from. Then if you see on the right hand side, the table 4 here, referencing non-textual element created from data from other source. Basically what it means is you created this table, but you have got this data from somewhere else and you have modified it to be presented in this way. So although the table is yours, the data is from the Central Intelligence Agency here. So it has to be noted correctly as well. And then you have another way, the table 5 here at the bottom, referencing your own textual element. So this is your own, okay? Based on some data that you've collected, it is your own data. So for your own data, some journal require you to actually mention the source is actually you, and some publications do not require. If no source is mentioned, it is understood that information is coming from you. Okay, so again, go back to the house style, go back to the reference methodology. Some if you look at APA have their own way of how do you reference this. We will do more details on this when we come to the class on APA referencing. Problems to avoid in result section. Discussing or interpreting your result. Save all this for the next section of your paper. Although where appropriate, you should compare or contrast specific results to those found in other studies, but the details should be reported in the discussion. Reporting background information or attempting to explain your findings. This should have been done either in the introduction section, but if you have not done it, no worries. Often the result of a study point to the need to provide additional background information. So you can still go back, as I've said before, and make the changes, revise your introduction based on your findings. Ignoring negative result. So this is another common mistake that a lot of people do. If some of your results fail to support your hypothesis or fail to respond to the research question, do not ignore them. Document them, then state it in your discussion section why you believe a negative results emerge from your study. Note the negative result and how you handle them. Often provides how you handle these negative result will actually provide you with the opportunity to write a more engaging discussion. So don't be afraid to highlight even though you have some negative result. Next, including raw data or intermediate calculation. Determine if you need to include any raw data in your study. As I've said, any raw data should appear in your appendix. But it differs from one study to another. Sometimes certain transcript from certain interview, you want to be captured in the result. Okay, so you can determine what part of the transcribed data needs to be used in the result and what should appear in the appendix. Be as factual and concise as possible in reporting your findings. Do not use phrases that are vague or non-specific. Okay, so such as appear to be greater or lesser than, or demonstrate promising trends, that very vague sentences that you use. Always be accurate when you present your result. Presenting the same data or repeating the same information more than once. This is another common mistake that you see. If you feel the need to highlight something, you will have a chance to do that in the discussion section, but do not repeat the same information by using tables and figures to explain the same data. You see that a lot. You have an analysis coming from, let's say if you're doing a quantitative research from SPSS, basic information, but the same information is presented in a table and also in a figure. You don't need to do that. So you've got to decide how you want to present the data. Confusing figures and table. Be sure to properly label any non-textual element in your paper. And remember, if the journal has no color, okay, there's no color provided for the publication, be careful how you present your figures and table, because they're going to be using grayscale. So ensure that the table or the figure is not confusing without the color. Finally, this slide basically is talking to you about why don't I just combine the results section with the discussion section. As I mentioned to you earlier, you can, but it differs from one publication to another. Normally, if you are new to writing, okay, very inexperienced in writing research paper, you should consider creating two sections for each element in your paper as to a way to better organize your thoughts. Think of the results section as a place where you report what your study found, and think of the discussion section as the place where you interpret your data and answer the so what question. And remember, always tie this to your research question. As you become more and more skilled in writing your research paper, you may want to meld the results of your study with a discussion of its implication. So as you progress with your writing skill, you will change the way how you write. And sometimes how you write will also be determined by the publication that you have chosen. Different publications have their different approach. Okay, so these are some of the references for this section here. So when you have the time, please have a look at some of these publications and resources, and I hope it will help you in ensuring that your publication is well written in the results. So moving on, I'm going to now invite Ms. Virginia Ballance to take us through the second part on the discussion part of writing the paper. Ms. Ballance.
Thank you, Vic, and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. After you've presented your results, you have to write up your discussion section of the paper. The purpose of the discussion is to interpret and describe the significance of your results or findings with respect to your initial hypothesis in light of what is already known about the problem under review. It's where you draw inferences and new insights or understanding about the problem. And it is always connected back to the introduction, where you have stated your research questions or hypotheses, and it is connected also to the literature that you have reviewed in order to situate your research in the context of what is already known. So it's really an integration of the introduction, what you propose to do, your results, what you found, and now this is where you infuse new understanding and knowledge together. But the discussion is not merely a restatement of your introduction or paraphrasing of your introduction, but it should explain how your study has furthered the understanding of your topic and has advanced knowledge of the topic. The discussion is often said to be the most important part of a paper. I'm not advancing. It's often considered to be the most important part of a research paper. Why? Because the busy researcher will be attracted to your paper first by reading the abstract and the title. Then they'll scan the introduction, and if it looks good, then they will read the discussion to find out what you found out and how you interpret the results. The discussion is where you explain the meaning of your research and interpret your findings and results and discuss their implications. It should also underline the importance of your study and how it fills the gaps in knowledge in your discipline and makes a contribution to your field. And it's where also you have revealed the gaps in the literature that had not been previously discussed. And it is in the discussion section truly where you can be as creative as you explain and interpret your findings or results. So it's where you infuse your results with meaning. A few tips on writing a good discussion section, a few general pointers. As you are free to write quite a lot as you explore and explain and interpret or discuss the meanings of your results, don't be verbose or repetitive. Academic prose is spare, it's not flowery, so you should aim to be concise, succinct, and make your points clearly. And you should also avoid jargon, and you should try to use, you must, I should say, use the same terminology as you have in the introduction and the results, so that the reader isn't left, what is this meaning? You should follow a logical stream of thought. If necessary, use subheadings if it will help. That is particularly used in qualitative studies where findings may be organized by category or theme and are best discussed separately. Typically, your discussion is written in the present tense, especially for established facts. However, you would refer to things in the past if that's appropriate. Again, the voice that you use in any research paper depends on the style guide for the discipline that is recommended. A few problems to avoid. What often happens is that the discussion section and the results section look the same. And that's why in empirical studies and some qualitative studies, it may be acceptable simply to merge results and discussion or findings and discussion in one section, because there's a tight relationship between the results and their interpretation. But the main thing is to avoid writing two results sections. Remember, results are for data, discussion focuses on the interpretation of that data. So you would see numbers in results and you'd see words in the discussion. The same thing applies to recommendations for further research. They can be included in the discussion section or in a separate conclusion section of your paper. Obviously, don't introduce new results in your discussion. Oh, by the way, oh, I forgot to mention, because your readers will be left wondering, where did this come from? If a result is important, mention it in the results section. So don't introduce new things in the discussion section which come out of nowhere. Don't overinterpret your results. Don't make inflated claims about your results. Don't read too much into your findings, especially if they cannot be supported by the evidence. And don't speculate on how your findings might apply to other situations unless you can support your claim using other studies. The contents of the discussion section, there are a few differences between qualitative and quantitative studies. As I say, the discussion section explains your results, and you should explain whether your results were expected, explain if they were unexpected and did not support your hypothesis, explain any unusual or unexpected results that you got, note any unusual patterns or relationships that may have emerged in the results. The discussion section is also where you place your research in the context of other research. So compare your results with findings from other studies. These may have been included in your literature review in the introduction, which situates your study in the whole discipline, but there may be studies which are relevant only to your findings, to your discussion, and so they can appear for the first time in the discussion section. You would also include a comment about how your findings can be applied more generally, the generalizability of your studies, what lessons were learned, proposing recommendations, etc. And as well, you should comment on your hypothesis, whether it was proven, disproven, and may require further research. In a qualitative study, the contents of the discussion section may be slightly different from a quantitative study. A qualitative study would begin with a description of the contribution of your findings and their significance of the research in understanding the discipline. Like quantitative, you would include a comparison, the similarities and differences with previous research, describing how your findings can contribute and be utilized within the discipline. While quantitative studies consider the limitations or weaknesses in the research design, in the discussion, a qualitative study would go deeper into the alternate explanations of the meanings of the findings and clarify the strengths and weaknesses of the approach in the study. And qualitative studies tend to outline emerging research questions, theoretical insights, or new methodological designs. So they're quite similar, but there are some differences. The organization and structure of your discussion section, you should think of it as an inverted pyramid going from general to specific. So first discuss your findings, restate your research problem, link it to theory and practice if appropriate. So begin first by restating briefly the research problems presented in the introduction, summarize your key findings to the questions posed in the introduction and how they support your hypothesis. Then discuss the implications of your analysis for each of your results. And they should be done from the most important set of results to the down. So you would write each one up in a pattern of restate their implications and then contextualize it in the literature and then conclude that each discussion of each result before moving on to the next one. And if there are any unexpected or ambiguous results, you should discuss those as well. In the interpretation of your results, you should consider the limitations or weaknesses of your study, commenting on their relative importance in relation to the importance of your interpretation and how they may affect the validity of your findings. Basically, comment on what the results can't tell us. You should conclude with a concise statement of why your results matter. This could be a short summary on the importance of your findings. And then follow that with a statement of how your results support the broader knowledge or understanding in your discipline, the generalizability of the results to other contexts or disciplines. And as I say, recommendations are sometimes saved for the conclusion section, but not always. And they should recommend further research programs or policy and what should follow after your paper. Limitations, a little bit more about limitations. You always have to acknowledge a study's limitations. Even though you think you've designed the world's best study, there will always be limitations. Acknowledging them shows that you have thought a lot about the problem, and it's and the literature that's about your topic, and makes people aware that you know there's still more to learn. It also establishes your credibility as a researcher when you acknowledge limitations or problems with your study. And it's better for you to write them up rather than have a peer reviewer come back to you and say, what are the limitations? Or perhaps your thesis board doing this for you. It's a subjective process because you have to evaluate the limitations that you've identified. So consider their impact on the methods that you used, the validity, and how do they really impact it, and what does it have, how does it detract from your overall study? Examples of limitations in the methodology might be your sample size. If it's too small, you are unable to find significant relationships from the data in a quantitative study, and that therefore limits the generalizability of your results. You may lack available data or reliable data, and this can cause you to limit your analysis or make it difficult to find a significant trend or relationship in your data. There may not be prior research studies on your topic, and that will depend, of course, on the currency of your topic. If you're unable to find literature on a topic, it's better to check with your professor or the librarian to make sure that you really haven't found that nothing exists, in which case you really are forging new ground. There may be problems with how your data was collected, and this may crop up as you are conducting your data analysis, that you realize, oh, I wish I'd asked another question, or maybe something went wrong in your data collection. For example, we had a survey where the first question people missed the way the survey was structured on paper, and they missed the first question. And so as a result, all the data we collected was wasted because the people didn't read the first question. So you need to be aware of all kinds of problems with collecting data. There could be limitations that are because of the researcher not having access to people, organizations, or documents. If you are denied access to data or people, then you should state that in your results, in your discussion. There also may be what they call longitudinal effects. In other words, you choose a topic that changes constantly while you're studying it, and so you need to keep updating your literature review. There may be some kind of cultural or other bias that creeps in. Biases can be positive or negative, and this can affect your writing on how you represent people, places, events, and it's something you need to be aware of. If you do detect bias in the literature, it's something that you can mention in the discussion. And of course, the last one is fluency in a language. The researcher's ability to read or understand research published in another language, because not all research is in English, and not all research is conducted in English language milieux. So there may be a field that you're studying which is prevalent in let's say Latin America, and if you don't know Spanish, that can severely impede your ability to collect data. So to sum up, the discussion section needs to, 1, restate your research problem that you investigated, describe and interpret the major findings. You need to explain your research, your results or findings, and why you think they are important, starting with the most important finding first. And they can be organized by each finding, as long as it follows the same pattern as that in your results section. You need to relate your findings or results to other studies and state how they support your study, how your study adds to the literature or contributes to the literature, and how your study differs and is unique. You need to think about alternate explanations to the findings, not just those findings which fit your assumptions. You must acknowledge your study's limitations and describe the generalizability of your results to other situations, and highlight questions in your study that may not have been answered or uncovered to lay the path for the next person to follow up on your research. So thank you. The discussion section is really an important section because it teases out the meanings of your results. So thank you very much. Before I sign off, may I ask university faculty to please take advantage of the many database trials and free access to resources that are being offered during this period of COVID-19. There are lots of things that we can use during this moment that we might not have access to otherwise. All off-campus authentication uses your university email and your password. I just want to remind you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ballance. So these are the references that you can get access to as well, even for this section. So once again, I'd like to thank Ms. Ballance for giving us a good snapshot of what discussion is all about. Come out of the screen first. So we have a few questions on the chat. Let me see. Okay. If I look at the chat, we have a few questions from Ms. Williams, Latonia Williams, who have been very consistent attending all our session. Let me see. The first one here is, can you advise whether or not passing a research course at UB, like SIS 398, which is focused on drafting the research proposal, qualifies the proposal as suitable or appropriate to advance the actual research? Does research department assist students with research so studies can get published? Okay, so if you look at the courses that you go, yes, the courses that you are attending will actually guide you all the way in writing a research proposal. And if it is well guided and well drafted, yes, you will be able to advance to do an actual research. But at UB, we also have another process called the internal review board. So the moment you're confident of a particular research and you're going to carry out a particular research or particular survey or whatever studies that you're doing, then you got to submit this to the internal review board if you're carrying the name of UB. Okay, so if it is not part of UB, then it's fine. But if it is part of UB, it is submitted to this internal review board, and the review board will actually comment on your study, and then they give you the input to say whether this study is ready or is qualifies for you to actually carry out, or is there a gap in the study. So you need to go through that process if you're carrying it out as an actual research. The role of research department, we don't really help directly. There's an indirect way of helping. There is a writing, I understand there's a writing department that assists students to help them in writing. So we're actually trying to work on this further now that we are working on the graduate program. The research department itself do not directly help students in publishing. They give you the avenues to publish. We conduct workshops like this to help, but not directly. We do not have a unit that help you or take the student to clean up their papers and then do the submission. But we provide sufficient support in terms of conducting consistent workshops. So I did the library, so I'm sure even the library, you have a lot of support system that is put in place to help students that need help in cleaning up their publication, even the writing center. Maybe Ms. Ballance, you want to comment on that?
Yes, thank you. Yes, indeed. The University Writing Center offers a lot of assistance with the actual writing of the papers. In the library, we can assist with the literature review and making sure your paper is unique and that kind of thing. I'm not certain about the statistical analysis, what kind of assistance, who they could go to. But and students mustn't forget about the student research symposium that's held annually, because typically in the process of writing a paper, before you send it out for review, for a publication, you should present your research to a group. So you have a peer review analysis where people will ask you questions, and this kind of helps you polish up your paper before you send it out for review. And that's typically how that is done, even in professors who are writing for publication, that they'll present their paper at a conference, get feedback, and then polish it up and submit if they think it's going to fly, because a lot of papers get rejected once they're submitted. Yeah. So there are, and then if a paper is considered, a student paper is considered, so to speak, good enough to publish, it can be submitted to the International Journal of Bahamian Studies, and the editor and reviewers there will help get the paper in up.
Yeah.
Shape it up so it can be sent out for peer review, because you don't want your paper to be rejected because of grammatical mistakes or badly formatted APA or methodological problems. So we do mentor people along if we can.
Yep. There's another question, follow-up question from Ms. Williams as well. How can students or the public assist with ongoing research opportunities at UB if lecturers they would like to work with and have no ongoing or capacity or requirement to involve students with their ongoing studies? Also, what ongoing research is the department currently involved with? Is there a reference with the this information. Yes, I think there are a lot of research that is taking place. There are research that is done individually. There are research that is done based on grants that is available. Yeah, I think this information may not be directly available in the website. So I think this is something that we need to improve. Try to put this up to look for potential students, faculty, or even the general public who wants to be part of this research. As we are currently moving towards trying to get our graduate program running, you will see this happening more efficiently. We're trying to put all the research projects out, all the publications out, so everyone knows who is publishing what, and what are the ongoing projects, what are the assistance that is required, where can they be involved in which kind of projects. So this is something that we are trying to compile now and try to put it up in the website. Okay, you have hands raised by Miss Elizabeth Williams. Let me unmute you. Yes, Elizabeth.
Hey. Yes, good day. I want to know if you'll be sharing the PowerPoint, Ms. Ballance.
Yes, we will. We will share the PowerPoint and also the recording of the session today. All, in fact,
Okay.
as long as you have registered, you can get access to everything, including the one you have missed, the first few ones. So we will give you an access to all.
Okay, thank you.
Any other question, feedback? Nope. Okay. So we have one more session on Tuesday, as I've said, to conclude the first part of the fundamentals of writing, research paper writing. We're going to focus on the conclusion part and also look at the other essentials that is needed, the final details that is needed when you write a paper. So we will wrap up the first segment of the session on Tuesday. And then, as I've said at the beginning, the Friday session will go ahead, although I know it is a public holiday. So you have an option to still come in, log in to listen, or if you just want to wait for the recording, it's fine too. As long as you have registered, you will get access to all the presentation files and also the recording of the sessions. And if you have any question, even after this session, please do not hesitate to contact us through research@ub.edu.ps. All right then, so if there's no further question, once again, thank you to Ms. Virginia Ballance for your help always in trying to assist us to run these sessions. These are all fundamental session, but it's an important session. It is always good to have this session as many times. I know some participants who have come to these sessions before as well, but it is always a new learning that you get whenever you come to any of these sessions. So thank you for taking your time to come here for the session today. Any last word, Ms. Ballance?
No, I just want to thank everybody for tuning in, and good luck with your research this summer.
Great. Thank you all. Have a good long weekend. So stay safe as always, and hope to see you on Tuesday. Bye-bye.